that the stones used in building the Great Pyramid came from Tora, and Tora is a 25-mile to the east.
The civilization we know most about in history built the world's most famous structure, yet left no names inside it. We are told that Khufu built the Great Pyramid using copper tools and 20,000 workers in only 20 years. But if you go inside the pyramid today, you will see something the textbooks never mention. Not a single carved name, royal seal, or hieroglyph on any interior wall. Graham Hancock has been asking this question for more than 30 years.
I think we're looking, again, at a lost technology. And it was this ancient apocalypse, 12,800 years ago, that wiped that.
What he found doesn't just challenge who built the pyramids, it makes you wonder whether the people telling the story actually know the answer. The man they tried to bury. In 2023, Graham Hancock stood before a room full of archaeologists and told them their entire timeline was wrong. They did not argue with him. They wrote to Netflix, demanding his documentary be relabeled as science fiction. The Society for American Archaeology said his ideas were linked to white supremacist ideology.
The theory is not closed.
It is closed.
No, it's not closed, sir.
Okay, I closed it.
And
I
am presenting my own theory.
Okay, I'm not going to attend this.
Academic journals stopped responding to his arguments and began ignoring him entirely, treating him as a problem to manage rather than a person to debate. This is what happens when you spend 30 years telling powerful institutions that their careers are built on a lie. Hancock was not always the man they wanted to silence. He started as a journalist, covering famines in East Africa for The Economist, writing about governments that falsified food supply data while their own people starved. Over the years, he learned to read the gap between official statements and what was actually happening on the ground. That instinct became his only tool. When he turned it toward ancient history, it pointed straight at the pyramids. His first major book came out in 1995. Academics dismissed it before the ink dried. Within 2 years, 3 million people had bought it. But the people trying to destroy him never answered the most important thing. His argument wasn't built on belief, it was built on a geologist. In 1990, Dr. Robert Schoch traveled to Egypt from Boston University. He had no connection to Hancock. He was a conventional academic hired to examine the Sphinx and confirm the accepted timeline for its construction. He studied the erosion on the body of the monument the way any geologist reads a damaged rock surface, looking at the shape and direction of the damage to understand what caused it. What he found didn't match the official story. Wind erosion moves across surfaces. It sharpens edges, scours them flat, and leaves a dry, sandblasted texture you can run your hand across. What was on the Sphinx body ran vertically, deep rounded channels pouring downward like the face of a cliff after years of heavy rain. You've seen that pattern on any old stone building left outside in the weather. Water comes from above, finds the path of least resistance, and cuts downward in long, curtaining grooves over decades. That is rainfall erosion. It only forms one way. The Sahara has not had that kind of rainfall since before 7000 BCE. Schoch presented his findings at the Geological Society of America annual conference in 1992. The geologists in the room agreed with his reading of the rock. The Egyptologists did not, because if Schoch was right, the Sphinx was carved during a wet period that ended thousands of years before Khufu was born. The institutions chose the timeline over the geology. Hancock chose the geology. And the further he followed it, the worse Khufu's case looked. What the stone says. We are told that Khufu's builders had copper chisels, wooden sleds, ramps made from rubble, 20 years and roughly 20,000 workers. Here is what they supposedly built with those tools. The base of the Great Pyramid covers more than 13 acres, roughly the size of 10 football fields laid side by side. Across that entire surface, the foundation is level to within less than 1 inch. Not 1 inch per section, 1 inch total, across the whole base. Set a glass of water anywhere on that foundation, and the water line stays perfectly flat from one end to the other. Modern engineers using laser-guided surveying equipment and GPS satellites consider that kind of precision on a surface that size a serious technical achievement. The structure aligns to true north, not magnetic north, which shifts year to year the way a compass reading drifts on a moving ship, but true north, the fixed axis of the Earth's rotation. The error margin is 0.05 degrees, about the width of a thumb held at arm's length against the horizon. Somebody achieved that using copper tools and wooden sleds. The casing stones are fitted so tightly that a playing card won't pass between them. Some joints are curved, some are angled. They interlock, designed to distribute weight the way pieces of a jigsaw hold under pressure. Builders today with diamond-tipped cutting equipment and computer-controlled saws work hard to match that tolerance on surfaces this size. The pyramid has 2.3 million of them. But this is where the story about Khufu starts to fall apart completely. The granite inside the chambers was brought from Aswan, 900 kilometers south. Some blocks weigh 80 tons each, the same as stacking 10 double-decker buses on top of one another. The official story says Khufu's workers cut and shaped those blocks using copper chisels. But copper is softer than granite the way a butter knife is softer than a brick. Archaeologists have tested this for decades under controlled conditions. The tools bend. Progress is minimal. The results look nothing like the precision found inside the pyramid. Nobody has shown how Khufu's builders actually cut that granite. Then there is the rate. To place 2.3 million blocks in 20 years, Khufu's workers would have needed to set one stone every 2.5 minutes, around the clock, every single day. No slowdowns for illness, flooding, broken equipment, or the death of workers. One block every 2.5 minutes for 20 years straight. The stone is the crime scene. Every cut, every joint, every alignment is evidence that the tools and the timeline attached to Khufu's name cannot explain. But the strongest argument against Khufu isn't in engineering. It's in the layout. One of the three pyramids sits in the wrong place. The smallest, Menkaure, is offset from the other two. Not roughly. Precisely offset in a way that serves no construction purpose. No drainage reason, no spacing reason. It just sits there, slightly wrong, as if someone placed it there deliberately. And someone did. Just not Khufu. The date, Khufu never knew. Robert Bauval was an engineer with a passion for stargazing. In the 1980s, lying in the Egyptian desert and looking up at Orion, he noticed something he couldn't stop thinking about. The three stars of Orion's belt don't form a perfect straight line. Two align cleanly. The third sits slightly offset, in the same direction and by the same proportion as the Menkaure pyramid relative to the other two. He checked it, then checked it again. The match wasn't approximate. It was exact. But here is where the finding stops being a curiosity and becomes a serious problem for Khufu. The Earth wobbles on its axis over a cycle of 26,000 years. A drift so slow, you would never feel it in a lifetime, like watching the hour hand of a clock. Over thousands of years, that wobble shifts the entire night sky. Stars that sit high above the horizon in one era drop much closer to it in another. Bauval used astronomical software to calculate when Orion's belt would have appeared in that exact position directly above Giza, at that precise angle in the sky. The answer was 10,500 BCE, not 2,500 BCE, not the era of Khufu, 12,000 years earlier. Whoever designed the layout of the Giza Plateau didn't map it to the sky above their own heads. They mapped it to the sky from 12,000 years before them. That requires knowing the sky changes, having the mathematics to calculate how it changes, and the intention to record a specific moment in that change by locking it into the ground. Those are not skills Khufu's engineers are credited with. Khufu's builders were following a blueprint. That blueprint was ancient before they arrived. Shok's water erosion pointed to before 7,000 BCE. Bauval's star alignment pointed to 10,500 BCE. Two men, two different fields, no collaboration between them. Both looked at the same plateau and found the same thing. Whatever was designed here was designed long before Khufu's grandfather was born. which raises the only question that matters. If Khufu's engineers didn't design the Great Pyramid, who did? And what happened to them? What erased the real builders? In June 2024, a peer-reviewed study was published in a journal called Airbursts and Cratering Impacts. The researchers were from the University of California, Santa Barbara. They weren't searching for lost civilizations. They were looking for physical evidence of a specific event in the geological record. What they found was platinum, shock-fractured quartz, microspherules, and melt glass at 3 separate sites across the eastern United States: South Carolina, Maryland, and New Jersey. 600 miles apart. Every sample came from the same sediment layer, the same date, 12,800 years ago. The same materials have now been confirmed at over 50 sites across every continent on Earth. Same layer, same date. Here is what that sediment layer means at the scale of a human life. A rock roughly 100 kilometers wide, about the distance you drive in an hour on a motorway, entered the atmosphere and exploded before it touched the ground. No crater because it never landed. The shock waves spread outward across the surface in every direction at once. The way a grenade detonating above a table damages everything on it without leaving a hole in the floor. The heat turned sand into glass. The pressure fractured quartz in a specific pattern, fine parallel lines inside the crystal that nothing else in nature produces. The debris fell across the entire planet. What came after was worse. The explosion destabilized the ice sheets already melting at the end of the last ice age. Temperatures dropped within years, not centuries. And over the following centuries, sea levels rose by an estimated 300 feet. 300 feet is the height of a 30-story building rising over every coastline on Earth at once. Every harbor, every port, every city built near water, which is where every advanced civilization always builds first, went permanently under. Everything on low ground drowned. Every record kept on anything that rots or burns was gone. What survived was what sat on high ground, in stone, built to outlast water. Now we reach the moment the whole script has been building toward. Robert Schoch did not work with Robert Bauval. Bauval did not work with the researchers at UC Santa Barbara. None of them were looking for each other. Schoch was a geologist hired to confirm Khufu's timeline. Bauval was an engineer staring at stars. Moore and his colleagues were studying atmospheric physics in sediment layers. 3 men, 3 fields, 3 continents, no collaboration. All 3 arrived independently at the same 12,000-year window. Khufu ruled around 2,500 BCE. The civilization this evidence points to lived 12,800 years ago and was wiped out by a comet. Their coastal cities disappeared under 300 feet of ocean. What they left behind on high ground, built in stone and aligned to their own sky, is what Khufu found when he arrived. He didn't build it. He inherited the ruins. Then he put his name on the only surface he could reach. The name on the wall. For 30 years, Graham Hancock struggled to get anyone to take this seriously. The problem wasn't a lack of evidence. The real issue was that the evidence was locked inside a building no one was allowed to properly investigate. In 1993, a German engineer named Rudolf Gantenbrink sent a small robot into one of the narrow shafts inside the Great Pyramid. The shaft was 20 centimeters wide, roughly the gap between a half-open laptop screen and its keyboard. The robot crawled 70 meters through solid stone before it stopped. Ahead of it was a limestone door, small metal fittings, never touched. Gantenbrink reported the discovery and was removed from the project within weeks. The Egyptian Antiquities Authority, then led by Zahi Hawass, took control of the shaft and barred Gantenbrink from returning. No explanation was given. The door remains closed. 32 years later, it is still sitting there in the dark. This was the pattern Hancock kept documenting. Not one dramatic cover-up. A slow, consistent refusal to look. In 2017, a scientific team used a scanning method that works the way an X-ray works on a human body. Particles from space constantly pass through everything around us, and denser material blocks more of them. By measuring how many particles reach detectors placed inside the pyramid, researchers can map what is solid and what is hollow, the same way a hospital scan shows bones and tissue. What the team found was a hidden space above the Grand Gallery at least 30 meters long, roughly the same size as the gallery itself. The Grand Gallery is a corridor inside the pyramid tall enough to walk through without ducking, and long enough that you cannot see one end from the other. The new space is at least that large. Nobody has been inside it. Zahi Hawass told the New York Times that the discovery added nothing to Egyptology. Then in 2025, at a book fair in Sharjah, the same Zahi Hawass announced a newly discovered hidden corridor inside the Great Pyramid that may lead to the long undiscovered burial chamber of Khufu himself. Same man, same pyramid, 8 years apart. In November 2025, a separate research team confirmed 2 hidden air-filled spaces behind the eastern face of the Menkaure Pyramid, each one large enough to crawl through. 6 years earlier, a researcher had predicted their existence based on unusual stonework on that face. The 2025 scan was the first evidence he was right. 3 pyramids. Hidden spaces confirmed in all 3 within the last 8 years. None of them opened. For decades, Hancock argued that the answers were inside the walls. The people in control reportedly keep saying there was nothing to find, and there's no hidden room. But the discovery that finally made Hancock say, "I found out who really built the pyramids and I brought proof," wasn't inside a hidden room. It was inside the one chamber that holds Khufu's name. The proof. Colonel Howard Weiss arrived in Egypt in 1836 with a problem. He had spent months on the Giza Plateau blasting through sealed stone chambers with gunpowder. It was not a subtle method, and he had found nothing worth reporting. His professional rival, an Italian explorer named Giovanni Caviglia, was already respected by the local authorities, and was 2 weeks away from publishing findings that would make Weiss irrelevant. On May 27, 1837, alone in a chamber he had just blasted open, Weiss found the only inscription in the entire Great Pyramid that names Khufu as its builder. No witnesses. Researchers who later examined Weiss's notebooks found erasures and altered dates. And something else. The hieroglyphic spelling of Khufu's name in the inscription matched a specific mistake found in Egyptological reference books published in England at the time. Not close to it. The exact same error. The kind of mistake you make when you copy a name from a flawed printed source, not when you read it off a wall that has been sealed for 4,000 years. His draftsman John Perring made the official drawings of the chamber. Those drawings entered the historical record and have been cited as proof of Khufu's authorship ever since. In 2025, a team ran a high-resolution 3-dimensional scan through that same chamber for the first time since Weiss blasted it open. What the scan showed inside the Khufu cartouche were markings not present in Perring's drawings. Not partially missing, entirely absent from the 1837 record. An Egyptologist named Alan Rowe had partially noticed these same discrepancies back in 1931. His observation sat in the published literature for over 90 years. No institution investigated. No authority responded. The 2025 scan confirmed that Rowe had been right to notice. No Egyptian authority has explained the discrepancy. Not one statement. This is what Graham Hancock means when he says he found out who really built the pyramids. It is not about aliens. It is not about Atlantis. It is about this. The entire official case for Khufu as the builder of the Great Pyramid rests on one inscription in one hidden chamber, found by one man who was alone, who had motive, whose notebooks show signs of tampering, and whose drawing does not match what a modern scanner found on the wall. Remove that inscription and there is nothing left connecting Khufu to this building. Nothing in any interior chamber, nothing on any wall. No body, no burial goods, no royal seal. No name carved anywhere that wasn't put there by Weiss in 1837. What remains when Khufu's name comes off the building is exactly what every independent line of evidence points to. A structure engineering his tools cannot explain. A line to a sky that existed 8,000 years before he was born. built on high ground above a valley that the floodwater swallowed, pointing to a civilization the official record has no name for, built by people who saw the end of their world coming and left a message in the only material that could survive it: stone. The granite box in the king's chamber has been empty for as long as any record exists. No body, no lid, no name. The door at the end of the shaft is still closed. The void above the grand gallery has never been entered, and the only inscription connecting Khufu to this building was found by a man alone with explosives whose drawing doesn't match the wall. Graham Hancock says the pyramid was never a tomb, that it was built by a civilization that knew it was going to be erased, aligned to a sky from 12,000 years ago, so that whoever survived the flood would know someone was here before them. If he is right, then behind that closed door is not the burial chamber of a pharaoh. It is a message, and we have been standing outside it for 32 years.